Time to get some paper out. Our favorite, CRIs. Pause the video and try it. Okay, New Zealand is an island. All right, so let's highlight that. That's key information. Off the coast of Australia. When settlers first arrived in New Zealand, they observed many species found nowhere else in the world. Well, that's because islands are geographically isolated in many ways. So that's point number one. As settlers brought non-native species, that's a different topic going on now. Many of the native species became extinct, and that's because non-native species or invasive species often uh, have no natural predators. They'll compete for the same resources better, oftentimes, and so the native species that were there before these non-native species were brought in will often will suffer. Okay, part A, using the theory of evolution. So you got to use something about evolution. Explain why New Zealand has unique species. Okay, well, we learn in order for evolution, evolution is the change in allele frequency, ultimately leading to new species. Okay, so that theory attempts to explain why we have new species. All right, well, in order to have a new species, you ultimately have to have reproductive isolation, right? And so there's three ways that can happen. One is geographic isolation. Okay, that means like in this example, a population of fox are separated by geography. Mountains, in our CRI problem, an island is separated by water. So some kind of earth feature separates a population, and eventually they'll turn into new species. In other words, they won't be able to breed, reproduce together if they were to meet later on. All right, and another way reproductive isolation can happen is through behavior. So if the behavior changes within individuals in a population enough, they will no longer mate, and eventually over time they'll become two different species. Okay, like here you have the meadowlark singing two different songs. They don't attract each other, um, so they're now considered two different species. All right, and the last one is the temporal isolation. This happens when you have a population and then the breeding time or the reproducing time or the mating time um, changes enough that even very similar looking organisms, or maybe they were once a population, that then they can no longer reproduce with each other. So that's called temporal isolation. And all of these can lead to reproductive isolation. In other words, the individuals can no longer um, that were once in that population reproduce. This is not related here, or that is related, but it's just we're not going to get into that. All right, so where were we? Okay, so you want to say geographic isolation um, led to reproductive isolation, all right, which led to the creation of what? New species, new species. Okay, so that's how you answer that question. All right, part B. Describe the probable interaction between non-native species and native species. Well, non-native species are not nice to native species, right? They have no natural predators. They compete over the same resources native species, so native species often suffer, possibly go extinct. I'll type this up for you because I don't have a lot of space on the screen. All right, part C. Describe another location in the world where a similar pattern of change has likely occurred. So just pick any island. You can pick Hawaii. You can pick doesn't have just pick Hawaii, something like that. Any island, and say, you know, Hawaii is also another example where geographic isolation likely occurred because it's an island. All right, so a population got separated and geographically, and then that led to reproductive isolation, and therefore you are likely to find unique species um, in Hawaii. Okay, and then you can also throw in this as well. Because there's a lot of tourists there, you can say people bring in non-native species that also compete with the native species. You don't have to know exactly, the a specific example, but just mention another island in this case, like New Zealand, and you'll be good. All right, so you can pause the video. Here's the typed up answers.